All right, now it's time to start dealing with this tank. And I really mean what I say by dealing with. This tank has a lot of problems. So the good news is I actually went through the trouble of fixing as many of those problems as I could possibly find. And I saved that file, the edited version of this. And I'm going to allow you to download both files in this lecture. So you should have access to tank1.blend and tank1edited.blend, which looks like this. So if I were to go back and forth for just a moment, one thing I want you to notice is, first of all, they look a little different because the smooth shading is on. If you turn that on flat, you can see they actually do have a lot more in common. So again, from Tank 1, this is the original file. With all I did was turn it on flat shading. And now if I go back over here, you can see they do look almost identical to each other. I did some things like I filled in the cabin of the tank so it's not hollow anymore. I also did the same thing to the exhaust system. It's no longer hollow. I did change the not the configuration, but I redesigned the wheels. I left the tracks the same. I left the fenders the same. The body is almost identical. I changed the way this is all interconnected, and I'm going to explain all this to you, just briefly how I did all this stuff. There's so much to edit that it's going to be hard to cover all of it in 20 minutes. So I'm just going to jump in and get started. Okay, so take a look at the original. Again, I'm going to flatten this. The first thing that I notice is there's a lot of flip to normals. So I'm just going to go and flip the normals real quick just to kind of demonstrate. So you can do this all at once. I'm selecting the tracks. I'm selecting the exhaust, this part of the cannon. I can see that they're flipped because they have a darker shade to them. This window over here is flipped. I'm only selecting one line from each of those objects, and then I'll Control L to select linked. And I think, oh yeah, there's more. The wheels, not sure. At this point, I'm probably going to turn backface culling on to help me realize which side is which. Okay, so it's this side. Basically, this whole side right here is all flipped. So I'm just going to select all of that, and likewise this whole section right here is all flipped as well. So if I just select all of these things, I'm not going to select these wheels because they're fine. I'm not going to select that window because it's fine, and then just Control F and flip normals. It'll fix everything all at once. So that was the first thing that I did. The next thing that I did was I reconstructed some of the top, okay? And really all I did with this is I combined these two shapes into one. I didn't merge them together. I literally reconstructed this shape. I'll show you exactly how I did it. I first started off by removing these faces and then dissolving some edges because they don't really need to be here. There's a lot more edges than those, but these I need to get rid of to be able to do this. I need to slide this back, and I need to see what I mean. There's a lot more faces in here, a lot more edges that you could dissolve if you wanted to. Basically peel that back, and the reason why is because I'm going to use this as a guide, this piece right here, and reconstruct it, but from this piece, because currently there are two separate parts of geometry inside the same object. So this is what I mean. So I'm going to bring this over here kind of close, and I should probably be in a side view in ortho so that I can get a good look of it, and put myself in wireframe so that I can actually see the lines better. So extrude and scale this out like this. And you can see that it doesn't line up perfectly, but I can bring it pretty close like this. And I'm going to move this up a little bit so that it's lined up a little bit better. About like that. And then I'm going to extrude this on the x-axis over to this edge right here, and then scale it out a little bit. And again, extrude, and I'm going to move this on the x-axis all the way over to this line. There's no reason to put either one of these edges in here because, look, this is a flat line. I don't know why those even exist. So what I'm going to do is just bring it straight over and then scale it out like this. And I think probably bring it so that it's centered like that. So I basically just reconstructed that shape. So if I go over here and I select one of these edges and I select linked, you can see that in this case it selected all the geometry that I want to keep. But technically what I want to do is eliminate the other piece. So select any part of the black lines that are showing through and then select linked on that, and you can see this is the piece that was left over. This is the part that I modeled it after, and I'm actually quite happy to eliminate that. So what I'm going to do is select it again and delete all the faces, and now that piece is gone. I basically did the same thing with these pieces. You can see there's one part right there, here's another part right here, and you have to look in between here, but there's actually a third part right there. And I used this, I kept this part because it had the most geometry, and I used this as a guide, and I basically reconstructed this so it followed the same shape, and then I deleted the guide, and I did the same thing down here. And while doing that, of course, it fixed this void space that you can see through, so I have a nice flat wall there and stuff. I'm going to pop over to the other object just to kind of show you real quick. So you can see it's one solid object. Everything is all blended together. You can see underneath here, I don't really need to have a face under there because it goes down into the vehicle, but this face is all new geometry right there, and everything else lines up quite perfectly. And this piece, the only thing I did to it, I guess let's go back again. So we're talking about this piece right here. So what I did to this piece is I removed the faces on the inside. As you can see, you would never be able to see those faces from the outside, so they don't really need to be there. I just went in here and selected the faces and deleted them. So moving right along. Okay, let's take a look at this piece now. This is the, I'm calling it the cabin. I don't know what the technical term is of this thing. But this piece was a lot of work. I ended up having to, first of all, dissolve a lot of edges. There's a lot of redundant seams inside of here. Whenever you do this, you just want to make sure that you don't change the shape of this object. So if you do something like this and dissolve the edges, just make sure that everything looks exactly the same and then move on. Because if you don't, it's like, let's say you select a bunch of lines and you don't notice that it broke part of the back side or whatever, then you're going to have a problem later on fixing it. And that's basically what happened to me. It was I went crazy dissolving these edges, which I highly recommend. But then after a while, I realized that I had deleted, or something funky happened to the back side of one of the edges, one of the walls, one of the faces, and I had to fix it. And there was a lot of reconstruction that happened on this. So the end result was this. I ended up, probably be easier to show you the finished. So this is the finished cabin. It's a lot fewer lines, and the window is built into it, and most important, there's nothing on the back side of the window. There's no faces inside of here at all. Let's see, what's next? These fenders, I basically just got rid of all these extra seams, as many seams as I could, and I left the shape pretty much the same. Same thing with this bottom piece here. Just eliminated, dissolved as many seams as I could and left that shape. I didn't really change the tracks at all. I basically just eliminated a couple of seams, mostly along the edges, the corners here, like for example this right here. Believe it or not, that whole seam can be eliminated, and so on and so forth. Now the inside of this thing, which is hard to describe, I actually changed this quite a lot. If you look at this one piece here has 386 vertices. Let's look at the faces. There's 480 faces. What I did was I minimized the geometry of this a lot. And let me show you what I did. I'll just show you the finished result. So here's the piece right here. So I'm just going to select linked and hide everything else, and you can see that this has 25 faces. Of course, this face here needs to be triangulated, so if I were to actually triangulate that, then there'd actually be 65 faces, which is still quite a few less than what we were just looking at. Huge difference. And if you really think about it, you don't need much more than that to be able to fill in this space. Another thing I did was I fixed the wheels. If you'll notice, the wheels stretch from the front all the way to the back. The other model had 2 sets of wheels, one on this side, one on this side. They both had these cylinders that poked out from each edge. I decided the sides on the inside don't need to poke through like that. And there's really no point in having 2 sets of wheels. You would never see this kind of detail, especially since you're probably, I imagine an object like this in a game is probably going to look about like this. And you're probably never going to see anything closer than this at any point in the game. So I really can't imagine why anybody would have such high detailed, polygons in the back sides of the wheels underneath. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I eliminated a lot of that. Let's take a look at the original. I'll show you. So these wheels, another thing that was messed up about them was that they weren't straight. Take a look at the center of this versus what it's supposed to be centered on. It's not straight. This one's even worse. By redesigning the wheels, I was able to fix all of that as well. The exhaust was quite a bit of work. I had to basically eliminate all of the interior geometry of this thing. So I had to go inside of here and select all of these edges, and it was painstaking. I had to go through and select all of these things. And once I got all of the interior, only the interior, nothing else, I deleted the interior, and then I basically did a loop selection on here and made a face fill there so that you couldn't see inside of that void space interior. And that's basically it. That's how I did that. I had some problems with these circles, but I ended up not redesigning the circles, but I ended up having to change the shape of the interior a little bit. I'll bounce back over to there again, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so if you notice that these circles, before these edges went straight in, now they kind of go in at an angle, and they have a face here. You don't see through it anymore. I mean, I suppose if I wanted to, I could push that face in more, but I don't feel like I really need to. I think if you put like a black texture there and you're looking at it from a certain distance, you probably would never know that wasn't hollow, and that's good enough. The windows, I spent some special care and attention making these work, making everything, basically eliminating a lot of the edges and vertices that were there originally and trying to keep things straight. So I spent a lot of time doing all of that. Wow. I mean, it was really a lot of work. And I removed the camera and the lamp, so that's gone. So I also turned on backface culling, so that's on. And as I mentioned before, I put this on flat shading. Another thing I want to do before I wrap up this lecture is I want to remove a lot of these unwanted screens. Really easy to do. And by the way, when you save this, these screens will be gone. So I've already done this before, so I'm just going to go real quickly and clean this up. So all I'm left with is the UV editing window and the default window. So that's it. I'm just going to go ahead and save this. So when you open up this file, you'll have exactly the same file that I have. So that's about it on this part. We've got everything kind of cleaned up and ready to go. Guys, before you jump into the next lecture, don't forget, try to unwrap at least this much of the tank right here, because that's what I'm going to be doing in the next lecture. So if you want to really get the most out of this course, try to do what I'm going to do in advance and then compare notes. You know the routine. I'll see you in the next lecture.